Welcome to our fifth video in our series, Imperfect Characters of Faith. So often we think that Christians need to be perfect, and yet we learn so much from our weaknesses and from our mistakes. And it's in those weaknesses and mistakes that God himself can move so often. Well, today we get to look at a servant girl called Rhoda and the disciples as they respond in prayer to a situation that was happening for Peter. I guess for you and for me, there are moments that we don't fully believe that God will work, or we don't understand how he works, or we don't actually see it, and it takes a while for us to believe it. You see, this is what was going on in Acts 12. In Acts 12, Peter had been placed in prison again and was due for trial the next day. And in the middle of the night, the disciples were praying. The church was praying. It's an amazing little verse. The church was praying. They were expecting God to do something. But what they didn't expect was what God actually does. Peter was led by an angel through two locked doors. He was led out from the prison and he made his way all the way to the house where the church was praying, and he knocked on the door. And as he knocked on the door, the servant girl called Rhoda came down the stairs, heard Peter's voice, and was just so excited, she didn't open the door to let him in. She didn't open the door to see him being there. She just went, "Wow, I'm off." And up she went back to tell the rest of the church. And of course, they believed he was there. Well, I don't quite think so. Have a little look in this verse, verse 15. "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, that Peter was at a door, again they said, "It must be an angel." Rhoda had heard Peter's voice. Rhoda knew that Peter had been miraculously saved. Rhoda knew that God had answered their prayers. And yet together, they didn't believe it. It wasn't until the very next verse, verse 16, "But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished." Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. You know, I wonder how often it is that we've prayed and we're expecting God to work in one way. Or we pray and we think God will only do a little bit of our prayers. Here, God answered all their prayers in an amazing way. And yet they must have had those questions. They must have had those doubts because they just didn't believe it until they saw Peter. And so our encouragement today is that when you're praying, when you're spending time, when you're interceding, is God can do immeasurably more than we can ever ask or imagine. And God is bigger than our imaginations. God is bigger than our hopes. God is bigger than our hearts in the way that God answered their prayers. And so let us always pray with expectancy. But when we see God at work, let us join in, let us celebrate, and let us acknowledge it. Oh, and by the way, if there are moments you haven't quite seen it, don't beat yourselves up. The church from this point continued to go from strength to strength as they learnt how God answered their prayers deeper and deeper and deeper. And so if you haven't quite believed God for something and then it has come through, don't use it as a part of discouragement. Be like Rhoda, who was just absolutely excited, so excited that she hadn't opened the door. And be excited that your faith may be built for the next time. That each time your prayers are answered, you remember and use them for stepping stones for the future, even when they've been answered in a way that is well beyond your imagination and well beyond what you could have ever dreamed of. Why don't we start enjoying praying big prayers and then celebrating them as we realize how God is doing things bigger than us?